This is the BBC.
Hey, it's your cool friends at Radio 2 here. We have jingles like this, just lying around.
88 to 91 FM. BBC Radio 2.
That one's called ID Sergeant, which I imagine is a Sergeant Pepper reference, which is particularly appropriate. In fact, I'm going to play you another one in just a moment. Anyway, it's a confessions podcast, obviously, as you might have gathered. Another audio array of terrible tales from the sinful Radio 2 listener, all needing a little bit of forgiveness from the juggernauts of justice. This week's concise collection features The Milk of Human Kindness, a story we called Story of the Blues, one we called Football of Confusion, and another one, Thursdays, was called Deadlock Holiday. Here it all comes. Father Simon and the most venerable clergy, I write to you to ask forgiveness for a most unnatural event. Oh, by the way, apparently sort of PG if you're having some food at the moment.
Good to mention at the top.
We've done a lot worse, I have to say. But,
Okay.
Just for the sake of ticking the box. A most unnatural event that occurred some 13 years ago. I apologise in advance if it causes anyone to feel uneasy or indeed put them off their tea. In an unashamed attempt to get you on my side, I will give you some background first. I am a generally patient and compassionate human being, but my...
Brilliant. Here we go.
But my saint-like qualities were tested during the years of enjoying the company of my mother-in-law. She was extremely generous and extremely nosy, says Jenny. She really would give Bergerac a run for his money in her ability to find things out about you, all in order to, and I quote, buy the most perfectly tailored gifts. This was extremely kind and thoughtful of her, but at times, to be honest, Father Simon, the gifts became a little overwhelming, and her desire to know everything about our family life became a little exasperating. I confess to childish thoughts of planting random notes in my drawers. And yes, that includes the drawer in which my bedroom, which she liked to have a good look through while she was babysitting for us. You may ask how I know this for sure. Well, one time she was babysitting, had to dash back unexpectedly to get the tickets that my baby brain had left on the kitchen table. I rushed in through the back door, and as she was nowhere to be seen, went upstairs. There she was in our bedroom, rapidly closing the bedside table drawers as I came in. Okay, so you've set out your stall, Jenny.
Yeah.
Father Simon, whilst I did indeed keep my head down, smile and do my best to be gracious in the early years, although steam possibly leaked out of my ears at times as she talked to all her friends about my intimate details, or at least those she could glean from my drawers, it was timely that a job move meant that we had to move to Devon, several hours away from my mother-in-law. By the time my youngest child arrived, I was loving being a mum and bringing up little people. With no hawk-eyed mother-in-law around, I could use all the shortcuts and was very grateful that I was able to breastfeed both for the baby's sake and for my laziness. I think it is safe to say that the distance much improved relations. I felt less under the microscope, and she enjoyed parcelling up the stream of gifts for the baby and sending them to us. Nevertheless, the pressure cooker was somewhat turned up a notch when she came to visit. So it was during one such visit when the most unnatural event occurred, for which I seek forgiveness. I had tiptoed downstairs with the baby one morning in the hope of 5 minutes peace to get breakfast ready. I was too late as my mother-in-law was already sitting at the table, waiting. That would be annoying. I made her a cuppa. She could have got her own. And had a quick chat, but realised that the baby was getting hungry. I had planned to get down early and stew some apples and pears for a fruity breakfast for her. But having taken the extra 5 or maybe 20 minutes sleep option instead, time was against me. Hunger was building, and it wouldn't be long before her lungs... This is the baby's lungs, would let out against the world and the neighbours and, worst of all, my mother-in-law, and would reveal that I was not, in fact, the perfect mother. I held my baby daughter on my hip, put the radio on, and jiggled her about to the music in the hope that it would distract her whilst I found some food. In the back of the cupboard was a pack of instant baby porridge. It just needed milk added, not as impressive as freshly stewed fruit, but needs must. As I may have inferred already, my mother-in-law is particularly observant, so the next manoeuvres needed to be like the SAS to avoid her witnessing them. I distracted her by putting the baby in the high chair and giving her a toy to play with, the baby. Then, in true secret agent style, I slid behind the door with the bowl of dry mixed baby porridge and, using one hand, squirted the milk directly into it from what we shall call nature's own source.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
15 seconds later, the porridge was ready. A perfect temperature. Nice and frothy.
What?
Smart thinking, Jenny.
Okay.
Returning like the vanishing magician's assistant, I appeared at the table. Porridge, spoon in hand, feeling smug that the baby was happy. Her mouth was wide open, ready for a delicious repast. Having sat at the table, judging my every move, my mother-in-law then gallantly asked if she could feed the baby her breakfast. My baby daughter, let's call her Fred for anonymity reasons, had been so hungry that she positively wolfed down the first mouthfuls and smacked her lips with delight at the delicious porridge. As you know, my mother-in-law took a very keen interest in everything. She was clearly intrigued to know more about the porridge that Fred was finding so tasty. I was standing at the kettle about to pour the coffee when something made me turn round. I'm not sure what, but in that moment,
Oh, no.
I turned round and met my mother-in-law's eyes. She had the porridge spoon in her mouth and was having a taste, whilst Fred was between mouthfuls.
Yes.
Don't choke.
Okay.
My eyes must have filled with horror as she paused for a second too, and I felt decidedly queasy all of a sudden. What happened next was that we both did the same thing. We said absolutely nothing and pretended it had never happened. We have never spoken of it since, though it is not so difficult for us never to speak of it, as it may not surprise you to learn that a few years later she became my ex-mother-in-law. However, I am not asking forgiveness for my mother-in-law's sake, as quite frankly it was her own fault for stealing her granddaughter's porridge. However, I do ask for forgiveness for my poor teenagers, as I recently told them this story, and they now cannot look their grandmother straight in the eye without thinking of her having eaten what nature definitely did not intend her to.
Yeah.
Yours grovellingly, Jenny, a not-so-perfect ex-daughter-in-law. And that was the unnatural act at which she was... unnatural event which she was referring to. Well, I think you're on sound ground here, Jenny. I don't think you're going to have too many issues, but let's check in with the collective here. What do you say there, Sister
I'm
Bobby?
still laughing, to be honest. Look, no harm done, really. And the thing is about the mother nicking the porridge, well, the mother-in-law nicking the porridge,
Yeah.
sorry, or just borrowing a spoonful. It's what we all do, don't we? We want to taste it and make sure it's all right for the baby. So I think, really, no one's in trouble. I think everyone's forgiven. And the mother-in-law, in the instance of eating the baby's porridge, that's absolutely fine. And by not saying anything by the mum...
Jenny could have said,
No, because I think the damage was already done. So it's one of those things about let sleeping dogs lie, so to speak, and basically just carry on with your day. I think, Jenny, that's a lovely story. Made me really laugh. You're forgiven.
Brother Matthew.
Well, I mean, let's peruse this for a second, because she did. I mean, this mother-in-law was going through her drawers. Who's got the right to go through someone's drawers? No one goes through anyone's drawers. That's not on. And then let's be absolutely honest about this. The reason why she is having that porridge is because the baby's really enjoying the porridge. So she's not testing the porridge to see whether it's going to be okay. She's going, how come the baby really likes it? Why is this porridge so great? So really, curiosity has got the better of said mother-in-law. But which of us could honestly say we wouldn't do the same when faced with amazingly great porridge? I know I like porridge, not like that, obviously.
Well, you don't know, do you?
That would be that would be weird as I prepare it myself. So I am going to say I am definitely forgiving that.
BBC Radio 2.
So Paul says, Father Simon, I worked in the Merchant Navy for 20 years, and it was quite possibly the happiest time of my life. I didn't always work on cruise ships, but when I did, it was always great fun. I was bar manager on a ship that shall remain nameless, just in case, even though the shipping company has long since gone out of business. So I think we're probably safe. The passengers on our ship, which had 10 bars in total, were predominantly British, but we did get large groups from different European countries from time to time, prompting the situation which I'm about to describe. We were doing week-long cruises from Palma de Mallorca, and on this particular cruise we had a group of French passengers that were headed by a very pleasant group leader. Well done. One of my weekly jobs was at the end of each cruise, I would visit each bar to do a stock check. And when I checked the blue curacao, which is, as you know, a liqueur from the La Raja fruit, a citrus plant available from the island of Curacao. Did you know that?
No, I knew it was blue.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, so here we go. We're checking the blue curacao in each bar. It was always the same result. No one ever drank it. Us Brits aren't really into blue drinks.
No, we're not.
According to Paul. Because we just like our beer. So every every week the bar just had the same amount as it had the previous week, whether it be a small drop or half a bottle. The lovely blue liqueur was untouched. In fact, I never had to order anything in the 4 months that I've been on board. However, that all changed on this cruise because a group of French holidaymakers absolutely loved it. And in 2 days into the cruise, we had pretty much run out in every single bar. We generally restocked up in Palma, which was 5 days away, so I called the ports that we were visiting. Bad news, the ports on small islands had no local supplies, no curacao was available at all, we couldn't get a crate anywhere. The French were beginning to notice that we had run out, and the group leader had a moan at me, "Where's my curacao?"
Oh, excellent. Yes, of course. Good accent.
It smells of elderberries. No, anyway, so they would just say, "Where's the curacao?" And I said, "Don't worry, monsieur, I will find you some somehow." Knowing how much the stuff the French were getting through and how much money we'd potentially be losing, I tried desperately to think of a solution. I was sat at one of the bars at the end of my tether when I spotted a bottle of triple sec, which is a clear liqueur with a base flavour of orange. In fact, I seem to remember it tasted pretty much the same as the blue curacao. In fact, I think, because I looked it up, it's pretty much the same as blue curacao. It's just that it isn't blue.
Okay.
It just happens to, it
Big
tastes,
difference.
Yeah, I know, but it happens to be transparent. It tastes
Okay.
orange. Anyway, a quick test confirmed the taste on both drinks was almost identical. However, the triple sec was clearly not blue in any way, shape or form. However, as I was pouring it into the empty curacao bottles, something else caught my eye. This was a container full of blue cocktail umbrellas. Now there's a thought. I took one and dropped it into the triple sec, and lo and behold, it turned blue right in front of my very eyes. The ink worked perfectly. I took the bottle and dropped a few more blue umbrellas in it, and the bottle turned a perfect blue. The shade was exactly right. This was fantastic news, as I had a stockroom of triple sec and more blue cocktail umbrellas than I could shake a cocktail stick at. Before long, I had magically transformed 2 cases of triple sec into blue curacao. And so I dispatched the bottles to all the bars on the ship, saying that I had made an error and discovered that I did, in fact, have the liqueur that the French needed. Hurrah and huzzah indeed. Feeling very happy with my ruse, I went topside to do my usual evening rounds of the bars, and to my relief there were lots and lots of happy French men and women drinking their coveted blue drink. I went into the main bar and the group leader came bounding over looking fabulously happy. He shook my hand and gave me a big wide grin. And it was at this moment that I noticed his teeth, which were bright blue.
Oh, yes.
As was his tongue, as was the rest of his mouth. I looked around and this seemed to be the norm for all of the French group. They all had the bluest of blue mouths. Next thing I knew, my bartenders were calling me, asking me why all the passengers had blue teeth. I shrugged my shoulders. A Gallic shrug. I made a sharp exit towards my office to spend the rest of the cruise keeping a very, very low profile. I only left my office when the bars were closed later that night, sneaking in to pull the remaining fake curacao bottles to try and reduce the fallout. I have carried this shameful deed for 20 years, only confiding in my wife, who thought it was absolutely hilarious. Anyway, I can confirm that no French people were harmed in the making of this confession in this very unsavoury situation, because all cocktail umbrellas are dyed with food dye, so it's not as if it's toxic or anything. And I have to admit that whenever I go into a bar and I see a drink with a blue brolly, I do have a little smile to myself. Well, I think that's quite an interesting point. We don't do blue drinks in general, do we? I'm not sure that...
Yeah, you do.
Do you?
Do you remember those cold ice drinks? To differentiate between raspberry and strawberry, the raspberry's blue.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
right?
those cold,
Was that one of the
frosty
frothy
things.
man? Was that one of
Yeah,
the...
it was a slush puppy. You
Oh,
still
the
get blue
slush
slush puppies, yeah.
Is that... Yeah, but...
And they turn your tongue blue.
Okay.
I have done this.
There's blue bowls as well, isn't there? Blue bowls? You remember blue bowls?
No.
We've all had blue bowls.
Are they the bluebells that come out in
No,
the spring?
blue bowls.
Go for
Blue
a walk and
bowls.
the beautiful bluebells.
Chicken bowls, like plain bowls.
No, right.
Anyway,
Blue
Bobby,
bowls, the
what do
drink.
you say to Paul?
Well, you see, my first instinct was, Paul, you can't use dye on people because, things could happen. But you are right, actually. They would have been dyed with food dye. What I can't work out is why do you just didn't go to the chef and go, can we have some of your blue food colouring? Surely that would have been easier than putting the blue umbrellas in. It's quite, it's quite insightful. I understand that you kind of saved the day. But the only other thing is you cheated the passengers. I mean, is triple
No, they
sec
loved
cheaper?
it.
They loved it. Well, you see, I'm not sure. I think, Paul, I will allow it but only just. But be careful what you put in people's food,
Yeah,
because
be
you
careful.
just don't know.
Yes, with the addition of the umbrella Ella. We got a story out of it. What do you say, Brother
Yes,
Matthew?
well, I mean, obviously I'm going to forgive because everyone wins out of this. The French get the drink that turns their mouth blue, and the ship gets lots of sales of triple sec that no one was interested in buying, which is great news all round. But I think Bobby's right. What you should do is then come up, because if you'd gone to the kitchen, no doubt the chef would say, well, I've got other food colourings. Why not try that? And you could have done a whole different rainbow of these different curacaos. I said, well, you may well try blue, but who fancies tangerine curacao?
No, they could have.
Who fancies
well, they only
maroon
wanted
curacao?
blue.
Well, maybe I like the different colours. So I am going to forgive because everybody wins.
Are you doing accents now?
Yeah, that's what I've decided
That's
to do.
Simon and the Divine Disciplinary Panel says, Yuri. Thank you, Yuri. My sorry story starts on a football tour to Scotland back in the mid-90s. Before I go any further, perhaps I should define the phrase football tour. This was a tour in the sense that the only touring would be from one drinking establishment to another and would be punctuated by a single football match where the standard of play from our team would be of the primary school reserve team level. Having endured a tortuous journey from South Wales to the east coast of Scotland in the back of a cramped minibus, my teammates decided an evening sampling the pubs and clubs of the nearby town of Falkirk would set us right. So we duly piled into the back of a couple of taxis. Now, because of the bilingual skills of many of our team members, conversations were often conducted in the language of heaven, or Welsh, as it's also known. A few of us were chatting away when the taxi driver asked if we were from Estonia, who happened to be playing Scotland in a World Cup qualifier in Glasgow the following day. I explained that far from being Estonian, we were a village football team from the deepest, darkest valleys of South Wales. This is Yuri speaking here. And we were on our annual football tour. However, this case of mistaken identity on the taxi driver's part did plant an acorn of an idea in my head. On arrival in Falkirk, we eagerly poured into the nearest bar and discussed such burning issues as tactics for the match and which of Falkirk's nightclubs, the Velvet Rooms or the Moon, we were going to frequent. One of my Welsh-speaking teammates and I were interrupted by a pretty young lady. "Excuse me," she said, sounding exactly like Claire Grogan from Gregory's Girl. Men of a certain age will understand the significance of this reference, and if you need any extra help...
Good. I'm glad we bumped into each other.
That was Claire Grogan
Yeah.
from Gregory's Girl. So Matt's obviously got it. But my friend and I, says this girl, my friend and I were wondering what language you're speaking. In a flash of inspiration and conjuring up my best comedy Eastern European accent, thanks, I replied with a flourish, which the late Peter Ustinov would have been proud.
Oh, here we go.
It is Estonian. Oh. Are you here to watch the match tomorrow? She asked excitedly. Noticing how impressed she appeared to be that I was an Estonian fan, I thought I would go one better. No, I replied a little indignantly. We are members of the Estonian...
Nendris. Yeah, go on.
We are members of the Estonian national football team. Anyway, you get the drift. Or maybe you don't. A puzzled look fell across her face. Oh, you surprised me. As she stared at the half-empty pint glasses that we were holding. Well, if you're playing tomorrow, she says, should you really be drinking? With inspiration flowing as readily as the beer, I explained that both my friend and I had been sent off in our previous qualifying match, a particularly ill-tempered affair played a few days earlier against neighbouring Slovakia, and as such we were suspended from playing the following day. I've since discovered that Slovakia is about 1,000 miles from Estonia. But anyway, don't let that trouble you. As a result, we decided to go against our manager's orders and stay in the team hotel and had snuck out to enjoy the nightlife of Falkirk. I didn't believe the story myself as the heavily accented words came tumbling out, but the ladies had fallen for it hook, line and sinker. They appeared delighted that they had stumbled on the Estonian equivalent of footballing bad boys George Best and Gaza. As this jape was going so well, I decided to up the comedy value even further at the expense of my teammate. Now, he was something of a suave, smooth talker, and this was the perfect opportunity to leave him speechless, quite literally. Allow me to introduce you to my teammate. This is Igor. I announced,
Igor.
conjuring up images in my head of a half-witted, hunchbacked henchman in the mould of a Peter Lorre character in a Hammer horror film. Forgive him, he does not speak any English. In fact, he has trouble speaking at all. I will act as a translator for you. I added.
Where are we now? I've no idea where this accent is.
Estonia.
This is like southern Italy.
No, it's Estonia next to Transylvania. Anyway, it was Igor that gave me the flavour. So, how was it that I spoke perfect English while Igor couldn't speak a single word, they asked. My imagination was now running amok. I told them that I had honed my perfect English following a big money transfer to Chelsea and in my spare time volunteered with various animal charities. Igor, on the other hand, I explained, was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. It was his first time abroad and he was only in the Estonian team because his father was the manager. This generated huge admiration for me and massive sympathy for Igor. The girls were obviously becoming quite interested in their charity supporting Estonian football superstar Bad Boy and his unfortunate sidekick Igor. Now, this growing admiration posed something of a problem, particularly as Igor and I were both married men in real life. In order to avoid any awkward misunderstandings, I opted to come clean to our newfound football groupies. I'm really sorry, I said nervously, not sure how my deception would be greeted, but actually we've been pulling your leg. We're not really professional footballers from Estonia. We're on a football tour from Wales. Wales? Interrupted one of the girls excitedly. We love Wales. Do you know the stereophonics?
Yes.
Well, funny you should ask, I started.
Brilliant.
Now, Father Simon, I either then said we were two married Welshmen who played for the equivalent of a local village pub team's fourth 11 and perhaps weren't the superstars we made ourselves out to be, or I said I was the Stereophonics manager and Igor was a roadie. I can't quite remember just now. Anyway, I need forgiveness from the two Scottish lassies who I so convincingly duped. They seem to be delighted to have met the Estonian football version of The Odd Couple. Neither do I wish to apologise to Igor, who eventually forgave me for casting him in the role of illiterate international footballer. No, I would like to apologise to the entire Estonian nation for my excruciatingly poor accent, me too, which I based on some kind of Russian version. Although I have since found out that the Estonian language is more closely related to Finnish than the Russian. Anyway, yours hopingly for a lenient yellow card rather than a rash red from Yuri Hudyanikagolov is how he sounded. Anyway, well, let's just check in then on the forgiveness stakes from the juggernauts of justice. What do you say to Yuri, Sister Bobby?
Well, the thing is, there are many points on this, but Yuri, you're such an idiot. Because being Welsh was enough. I know many a woman that would fall over, and a man actually, that would fall over for even the slight lilt of a Gaelic accent. So being from Wales was enough. You didn't have to be from Estonia. So you're a big twit for that. But it's funny because you talk about confessing. You confessed to the girls that you were from Wales. You didn't confess to the girls that you were married.
Well, I think clearly
So,
there was. I don't think there was anything
no.
to confess to,
Well,
in as much as they
yeah.
just had some.
Yeah, but they were having some fun.
Chatty fun.
Yeah, chatty fun. But we forgot to say, actually, we're really from Estonia. We won't tell you that we're still married. We'll tell you we're from Wales. So I'm going to say that, Yuri, completely unnecessary. And no, you're not forgiven.
Not forgiven, all
It's
right.
your wives you should be asking forgiveness of.
Brother Matthew.
I think the accent alone means this is going to be the best one we do this week. That was absolutely superb. And the masterstroke there is not only having done the accent and then saying you're footballers, but to say, oh yeah, and I do a lot of work with animal charities as well.
That's right.
Oh yeah. So I love that, but I think really should have kept it going. I mean, obviously keeping it classy and above board and all those things, but you should have kept it going. So for that reason, I'm not going to forgive.
BBC Radio 2.
Dear Father Simon and the Synod for the Forgiveness of Sinners, myself and my wife Anne, daughter Catherine and son Dominic have always enjoyed our summer holidays in Southwold in Suffolk. Well, when I say enjoyed, I mean I have loved it, Anne has tolerated it, and the children have moaned like hell. Why do we have to come here every year? Why can't we go somewhere warm? This is so boring, and so on. This is the kind of stuff that we get. This story concerns our holiday in 2014, and as usual, I, Jim, am blissfully happy, and my wife is trying to keep the peace between our warring and wearing children. Catherine is sulking in a way that only a 16-year-old girl can, and Dominic is in a mood because the one thing he likes doing on holiday, swimming in the sea, is off the agenda because of dangerous tides. In order to lift flagging spirits, I suggested our annual trip to Snape, and ignoring the kids' protests, off we trekked through the glorious Suffolk countryside. It does seem that this entire holiday revolves around Jim and nobody else. However, the kids were too engrossed in their phones to appreciate the amazing sights as we passed them. I mean, they completely missed Aldborough with its 17th century moot hall. What is going on? This ignorance was beginning to make me feel a little bit hot under the collar, and I suspect at one point I might have snapped at them that they were ruining a family day out. The grunts got deeper and more adolescent, and in truth my temper at their ingratitude got greater. We arrived in Snape and we parked up, and Anne and I enjoyed our time in the kitchen and antiques shops. We went into a card shop where my son had once been sick, and pretended we could still see the stain. But the joke wasn't funny anymore, and unfortunately by this time the kids' boredom and behaviour had reached all-time lows.
I wonder how.
Surprised that.
Determined not to give in to them and their desire to have a good time on holiday, we all marched over to the local nature store. All of us were grumpy with someone else, but this did promise to be the last stop before returning to Southwold. My son can be a little clumsy, and as we entered the shop, I saw it was full of porcelain birds, porcelain plates and porcelain mugs with local views on them and various other breakable knickknacks. "Don't you dare touch anything in here," I warned. Super friendly like. "You've already put a downer on the day with your grumpiness, so if you break anything there won't half be trouble." His reply was, "Just hurry up, Dad, and we can get out of here." I have to admit, Father Simon, even his tone was winding me up. I made my way to a shelf at the back of the shop where there were some fascinating tomes on the birds of Suffolk, the villages of Suffolk, and the US Air Force in Suffolk in World War II. I picked a particularly interesting book from the shelf on former Suffolk railway lines and began to browse.
Really? Goodness
You
me.
can imagine how the kids are feeling at this point. I was soon aware of my son at my left elbow, and I knew that by standing next to me he was trying to encourage me to get a move on. I think we've all experienced moments like this. I didn't look at him so as to avoid giving any attention. In fact, I determined to take just a little longer reading about the Walberswick branch line. It was a fascinating story, and I thought the longer I take reading this, the less happy he'll be. His response was to pick up a card from the lower shelf of a wren and open it so that the whole shop could hear the recording of the song of that little bird. Don't react, I told myself. Don't even look at him. He's just trying to wind you up. Seemingly frustrated, he shut the card and then opened it again, and the song restarted. Halfway through that, he shut the card again and opened it for a third time, and the song began for a third time, and that was it. He was just embarrassing me, annoying the other customers, and probably using up the battery in this card that I would then have to pay for, and I snapped. Without looking, I reached down with my left hand, I snatched the card from his annoying grasp and shoved it back on the rack.
Oh, no.
At this point, I turned slowly to my son and started to berate him. "You wretched child," I said. "Your face has been a picture of misery all day. Why do you..."
Oops.
By this time, I was facing Dominic. Except that, as you might have realised, it wasn't Dominic. It was a rather bemused and slightly tearful boy of about the same height as Dominic, who had just had a card snatched out of his hand and been shouted at by a complete stranger. A somewhat grumpy stranger who thinks the world revolves around him. Bit of editorial. So it was certainly cold in Suffolk that day, but two things warmed the East Coast up. One, my bright red flushing cheeks, and two, the fiery trail I left behind me as I sprinted from the shop in complete embarrassment. I believe I muttered some pathetic apology to the boy about thinking he was my son, but looking back, even that didn't come across well, least of all to the boy's 6-foot father, who had to sprint past on the way out of the shop. I don't beg forgiveness from my family, as they all appear to still revel in my embarrassment to this day, and guffawed all the way back to Southwold. "This is the greatest holiday ever," they all agreed. Nor do I seek forgiveness from anybody at Snape Maltings, as I am sure they were as amused as my family, although I never stopped to ask them as I drove away a little too quickly. However, I do obviously need forgiveness from the boy in the shop who completely innocently was interested in the song of the wren, only to be verbally abused by a grumpy old so-and-so whom he'd never met before, and the grumpy old so-and-so hopes he will never actually meet again. Anyway, this is Jim who sends in the tale, and it may well, it was just one of those tales of getting the wrong kid, you see, and maybe other people have done it. We'll find out with the people's verdict, but Sister Bobby is going to go first.
You see, Jim, your resolve and your tenacity and your determination got you into trouble. It's difficult, really, because I thought, actually, your son had top-trumped you, and I thought, well done to him, actually, to Dominic, because I thought he was going to be more annoying than you were. But it does seem a shame that this boy got shouted at. So you're forgiven in one way.
Well, I'm surprised that you say that, because
Only
I think...
in one way.
Well, Jim seems to just book this holiday every year because he wants to go, even if nobody else wants to go.
Well, yeah, I know that. But the thing is, you're not forgiven for berating that young boy, because he might have been really, really upset, and you should have apologised much more sincerely and made it up to him in some way. But what I think you
Give
did
him money.
do
Just give him money,
is you
Alan.
provided some worthwhile entertainment for your children and something they could remember, making memories and all that. I think it was worth
A
it.
souvenir exercise book or something. Novice Nigel.
Well, I'm not sure if he actually even properly apologised to the boy he'd abused verbally. And also, Dominic and Catherine, I do think that probably the most exciting thing to happen on your holidays, because for you, these were dull holidays. You couldn't even go swimming. Catherine couldn't do anything. Every year, Jim insisted that they went on holiday to Southwold, where they obviously didn't want to go. And you imagine in middle teens having to go to Southwold. Nice that it is.
It's a beautiful place.
It is a beautiful place, but that is your holiday of the year, every year. Talk about ingratitude. I think it's Jim who's the one who's shown massive ingratitude. By the way, there are more UFO sighting, I think, by American air bases in Suffolk. That was one of the big places where they all happened. It says a lot about the American air bases, but that's where they were all happening.
Very nice fish and chips.
Yeah. Oh, the area's lovely. I do feel, though...
Nice bakery.
Yeah, for Dominic and Catherine
Nice
and
brewery.
the long-suffering... Yeah, it's a great part of... I love that part of the world a lot. And the branch line to Walberswick, which is no longer there. But Jim, the synod of forgiveness are definitely not in forgiving mood. Right. No, you're not forgiven.
Brother Matthew.
Well, speak for yourself, Nigel. Am I to be the only one to stand up for Jim here? He's having to deal with these grumpy teenage offspring, and has decided the best way to do it is to be as petty as possible. I say full square behind you there, Jim. Quite right. The only language these teenagers understand is me being petty back at them. And am I the only one to think, what is this kid doing with the wren? Why is he picking the card up and playing the wren thing again and again and again? Maybe, sunshine, you want to either buy the card or put it back. So I am going to say definitely forgiven.
Well, they were this week's confessions. Who did you forgive, if indeed you forgave anyone? Maybe you've thought, blimey, I've got a story that's just as bad as those. In which case, on an email, please, confessions@bbc.co.uk. If you missed any of our shows this week, thanks for your lack of commitment. You can listen back online. Download to your smartphone or tablet from the BBC iPlayer radio app. Monday, Nicola Adams was my top guest. We found out that midges are more likely to bite if you have cheesy-smelling feet. Apparently, this is all true. Tuesday featured Deep Purple, David Bowie, Hurricane No. 1 and Marvin Gaye. Wednesday, Giles Martin, son of Beatles producer Sir George, came in to talk about him remixing Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band ahead of the 50th anniversary, which is on the 1st of June. So here's another one then. Very similar, but slightly shorter.
88 to 91 FM.
It's almost like being in Abbey Road, isn't it, really?
BBC Radio 2.
And on Foodie Thursday, Nigel took a tasty recipe and made it even tastier with truffled mac and cheese with sweet corn fritters. And also the Estonian ambassador was on to discuss my Estonian accent, such as it was. If you made it to the end of last week's podcast, you had to tweet Alan, Al, Steve. Anyway, thanks to Heidi, Lord Treby, Alison and Sam and many more who did just that. And a special mention to Andy Stilp, who tweeted me pictures of 4 different Allans: Dedicote, Alder, Thick and Rickman, I think. Anyway, this week, a choice of code phrases, depending on your suitability. Either go for, I'm ever so sorry, Mr. Ambassador, or I've got cheesy feet and I don't care. Whichever you like, really. Happy Christmas.